What is going on, Pokemon collectors? Welcome back to my channel. Link Light here with another Pokemon video. Today's Pokemon video is another Shiny Cardboard Chronicles episode because let's face it, I like Shiny Cardboard and you like Shiny Cardboard too. On today's episode, we'll be covering the first 8 Holos from the second set in the Neo era, Neo Discovery. Well, that's enough of me talking. Let's get started and check out some shiny cardboard. Holo number 1 is probably one of the most iconic cards in this set. It is the first ever Espeon Pokemon card ever released, and this Espeon was illustrated by Nishida. The description of this card says, it uses the fine hair that covers its body to sense air currents and predict its enemies' movements. In a first edition PSA 10, Espeon has a PSA 10 pop of 95, and that 95 is out of 1,683. Now, let's look at some data. According to PSA.com, this graph says the last sold was for about almost $44,000, and the average price of Espeon in a first edition PSA 10 is currently around $25,800. That is a very expensive card. Let's look at some sales of this first edition Espeon card. The last couple sales, and again, this is 2026, so it's in the same year. At the bottom, we have 23,000, and that was in March. And who knows if that was actually what they paid for, or if they actually went through with the sale. And at the top, Golden Auctions went for about almost $44,000. So I'm assuming that's more of the recent price. Let me know your thoughts. What would you pay for Espeon in a first edition PSA 10? Now, for the regular edition of Espeon in a PSA 10 has a PSA 10 pop of 100, and that 100 is out of 4,852. According to this graph, this Espeon in a regular edition of PSA 10 has an average price of about $16,000. Let's look at some sales for this Espeon in a regular edition of PSA 10. At the bottom, in March, we have a sale for about $4,500. And recently, not too long ago, maybe less than a month ago, depending on when you're watching this, we had a sale for about $16,200. In the comments, let me know what would you pay for Espeon in a regular edition of PSA 10. Holo number 2 is Fortress, and Fortress was illustrated by CRCG Gangs. Now, the description of this Pokemon card says, its entire body is shielded by a steel hard shell. What lurks inside the armor is a total mystery. The PSA 10 pop of Fortress in a first edition of PSA 10 is currently 80, and that 80 is out of 663. Now, according to the data, the average price of Fortress in a first edition of PSA 10 is currently around $1,500. So it's not too pricey, but it's pretty pricey according to the average person. Let me know your thoughts on Fortress in a first edition PSA 10. The unlimited version of Fortress in a PSA 10 has a PSA 10 pop of currently 61, and that 61 is out of 788. The average price of the unlimited version of Fortress in a PSA 10 is currently $400. Again, not a very popular card, and still to this day it's really not. Let me know, what would you pay for Fortress in an unlimited PSA 10? Holo number 3 is Hitmontop, and Hitmontop was illustrated by Kazuki. The description of this card says, if you become enchanted by its smooth, elegant dance-like kicks, you may get drilled hard. The PSA 10 pop of Hitmontop in a first edition of PSA 10 is currently 36, and that 36 is out of 700. The average price of Hitmontop in a first edition of PSA 10 is currently $4,600. In the comments, let me know, what would you pay for him on top in a first edition PSA 10? The regular version of Hitmontop has a PSA 10 pop of 20, and that 20 is out of 1,588. Unfortunately, because Hitmontop in the unlimited version of PSA 10 only has 20, there was no data that I can get from PSA.com. Let me know in the comments, what would you pay for this Hitmontop in an unlimited version PSA 10? Holo number 4 is Houndoom, and Houndoom was illustrated by Yoshida. Now let's look at the description of this Houndoom. Upon hearing its eerie howls, other Pokemon get the shivers and head straight back to their nest. The PSA 10 pop of Houndoom in a first edition PSA 10 has currently a pop of 43, and that 43 is out of 1,147. The average price of Houndoom in a first edition PSA 10 is currently $7,500. In the comments, let me know, what would you pay for Houndoom in a first edition PSA 10? The unlimited version of Houndoom has a PSA 10 pop of currently 18, and that 18 is out of 2,154. The average price of Houndoom in the unlimited version of PSA 10 has an average price of currently $2,500. Let me know, what would you pay for Houndoom in the unlimited version PSA 10?